All right, so section 5.3 talks about how to factor trinomials of the form x squared plus bx plus c. Okay, so guys, what we're going to do here, we're still going to use the method of grouping, right? But if you remember from section 5.2, when we had grouping, we had four terms, we had four pieces. If you notice in these problems that I have here in 5.3, we all have three, okay? So all we're going to do is we're going to rewrite the problem so that we do end up with four, okay? All right, so my first step in every one of these problems, guys, I want you to notice that all the problems, the number in front of the x squared on all of these is the number 1, okay? So my first step, I'm going to write down the number 1. My second step, I'm going to multiply the first number times the last number. So I'm going to multiply 1 times 42. I'm going to do this over here on the side, guys. I'm going to get the number 42. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at all the numbers that I know that multiply to 42. Okay, if you want to do that, let's grab our chart. Okay, so I see 42 right here in the middle, 6 and 7. And I also see 42, I see it somewhere else. Here we go. Right here over in the top right, 3 and 14. And is that the only place I see it? So far, that's the only place I see it. So let's do this. Let's say, okay, well, I know I can always get 42 by going 1 and 42, right? Let me fix that up. It's a little messy there. So let's do this. There we go. Come back. 1 and 42. I know I can divide it by 2. 2 and 21. I think we said 3 and 14. And the next ones were 6 and 7. Okay. What I'm going to do, guys, is I'm going to look for the pair of numbers that multiply to 42. So I'm going to look at these numbers in pairs. And I'm going to ask myself, which of those pairs, when I add them together, gives me the number 13? Well, excuse me, I know the numbers 6 and 7 add up to 13, right? So this is what I'm going to do first. I'm going to rewrite the problem. I'm going to write it like this. X squared. Instead of me writing the number 13x, I'm going to write it using 6x plus 7x, and then I'll put my 42 at the end, right? Okay, so now what I'm going to do, I'm going to take my box, I'm going to say, look, now I got my first two pieces. What can I factor out of both of them? Oh, look, we can take out the letter x. When I do that, I end up with x plus 6. Okay, let's use a different color. Let's use green. I'm going to circle those two and say, what number goes into both of them? Well, the number 7 goes into both of them. If I take out the 7, I'm still left with an x. 7 goes into 42 6 times. If you notice, those pieces match up. So I have an x plus 6 and an x plus 7, right? And that's how I'm going to do every one of these problems, okay? Let's take a look at the next one. We'll go about it the same way. I'm going to think of this number here as the number 1. I'm going to multiply the first number and the last number. So 1 times 21 is going to give me 21. I'm going to put down all the numbers that I know that multiply to 21. Well, 1 and 21, and the only other numbers that multiply to 21 are 3 and 7. Now I'm going to ask myself, which of these pairs adds up to the number 10? Well, those do. Okay, so let's rewrite this problem like this. We're going to go x squared plus, I'm going to use now a 3x and a 7x, and then my 21. So again, all we did is we rewrote the number 10 using the numbers 3 and 7, right? So now let me box these first two. They both have the letter x, and when we factor that out, I'm left with an x plus 3. Okay. I'm going to circle these two here. I can take out the number 7, and if I take out the 7, I'm left with an x plus 3. Notice those pieces match up, so I'm going to write that down as my first factor, x plus 3, and my second factor will be whatever I'm left with, x plus 7, right? Okay, let's take a look at the next one. So we're going to keep playing this little game as long as we can. So I'm going to think of that number as a 1, right? So 1 times 15 is the number 15. So what numbers multiply to 15? 1 and 15 and 3 and 5, okay? Now I want you to notice, I'm looking for the numbers that are going to add up to this number. Well, that number is a negative 8. So this is what I want you to think about. I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to a positive 15, but they have to add up to a negative 8. Besides 1 and 15, I want you to realize the negative 1 and a negative 15 also multiply to a positive 15, as do the numbers negative 3 and negative 5. You multiply a negative times a negative, you get a positive. But if I were to add those two numbers together, a negative 3 plus a negative 5 would give me a negative 8, right? If I owed you $3 and I borrowed 5 more, now I owe you 8. So I want you to notice that my signs here are going to be negative. So let's rewrite our problem. X squared. I'm going to put a minus 3x, a minus 5x, and that plus 15. And again, we just rewrote negative 8 using negative 3 and negative 5. Okay. So let me box the first two. I can take out an x. I'm left with an x minus 3. Okay. Let me circle the next two. Okay. First thing I notice, there's a negative there, so I'm going to take out a negative. They both have the number 5, so I'm still left with an x. 15 divided by negative 5 is a negative 3. If you notice, those pieces are matching up, so that's an x minus 3, and we're left with an x, oops, not plus, but minus 5. Okay. Now, guys, there is a bit of a shortcut, and if you haven't seen it yet, I'm going to show you right now. So let me take a marker, let's use blue. I want you to notice, look at the numbers we used here. We used 6 and 7, and look at my answer. X plus 6, x plus 7. Over here, we used a positive 3 and a positive 7, and look at my answer here. X positive 3, x positive 7. And if you look at my numbers right here, negative 3 and negative 5, x with a negative 3 and x with a negative 5. So now that I know there's a shortcut, right, let me start using that shortcut, okay? So I'm not going to have to do the same process every time. I'm going to do parts of it, but not everything the same. So let's use the shortcut for this next problem. First thing I'm going to do, I'm going to think of that number as a number 1. I'm going to multiply 1 times 44. Well, 1 times 44 is still 44. Okay. So when I make my list, 1 and 44, 2 and 22, 4 and 11. I'm looking for the numbers that add up to 15. Well, hey, 4 and 11 do. This is my shortcut, guys. This is always going to be an x and always going to be an x. If you notice, the sign of the 4 and 11 are both positive, so I'm going to write a positive 4 and a positive 11. There's my answer. Okay. Let's take a look at the next one here. So again, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to multiply 1 times 42. Oops, sorry. That's still the number 42. So 1 and 42, oops, 1 and 42, 2 and 21, 3 and 14, and I think we used 6 and 7 earlier. I want you to notice here, get my pen, oops, this is a negative 13. So if I make both of those numbers negative, this is going to help me out, right? Okay, so look, let's take a look. How about if we use a negative 6 and a negative 7? So again, my shortcut, I'm still going to put an x here. I'm still going to put an x here. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to write a negative 6 and a negative 7. Okay. So let's try the next one here. I'll put my 1 right there. I'm going to multiply 1 times 20. I'll just do it right here. That's a 20. So 1 and 20, 2 and 10, 4 and 5, right? We want our numbers to add up to a 9. These numbers add up to 9. So we can go like this. X and x plus 4 and plus 5, right? All right, so guys, I'm going to clear some of this out because I just realized that there is a problem that a lot of times occurs, and for whatever reason I didn't put one like this on our notes. So I'm just going to erase some of this mess here, and I'll just write up a new problem so that we have some space to work that out in. Okay. All right, so let's see. Let's try x squared. Oh, let's go minus 8x and minus 20, okay? So first thing I'm going to do here, take my pen, right? 1. I'm going to multiply the first number and the last number. Look at the last number. The last number is a negative 20. So 1 times 20 is a negative 20, right? So look, I'm going to go like this. 1 and 20, 2 and 10, 4 and 5. Now the only thing is I want to get a negative 20, right? So because I want to get a negative 20, one of those pairs, one of the numbers in my pairs is going to have to be negative. The easy way to figure out, well, what number is going to be negative, what you want to do, let me get my pen going again, you want to look at the sign of the middle piece. If the sign of the middle piece is negative, then in my list here, these are my bigger numbers. I'm going to make these negative. So I'll make that a negative 20, a negative 10, and a negative 5. If I were to add those two numbers together, that would give me the number negative 8, right? So then I could write this as x, that's a positive 2, and x with a negative 10. And that would give me my answer, okay? So let me just do one more like that to make sure that we're all okay. So look, I'll try another one here, x squared. Let's see, let's go a plus 5x and a minus 24, okay? So I'm going to do, again, I'm going to do exactly the same thing. I'm going to think of this as the number 1. So I'm going to multiply 1 times negative 24. Oh man, I don't got too much room, but I'll do it right here. Negative 24, okay? So I'm going to go like this. Well, 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and, 3 and 8, and 4 and 6 also work. Okay, there we go. We got some more room. All right, so again, first thing I want you to notice, this number is a negative 24, as is that number there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the sign. Let me get my pen again. There we go. I'm going to look at the sign of the middle piece, which is positive. That's going to tell me the big numbers will have that sign. These are all going to be positive. So these here will be negative. I want to end up with a positive 5. So a minus 3 and a plus 8. So when I factor that out, that'll just be an x minus 3 and an x positive 8. Okay. So the last part I'm going to show you guys before I go on to the next page is just how do I check my answer? Well, we just multiply. So look, x times x, here's an x squared. X times 8, that gives me an 8x. Negative 3 times x, that gives me a negative 3x. Negative 3 times positive 8, negative 24. We can combine those two to give me a positive 5x and my minus 24. And if you notice, that's what we started off with, right? So this here is my answer. This part right here, guys, is just to make sure that I check, that I do it right, right? And you can do that with any of the problems that you have up here. You can always do the check, right? So let's go on to the last page of 5.3, which is right here, okay? And I want to do exactly the same thing we were doing before. So first thing, before I do anything, I want you to notice that the number in front of that x squared is not a 1, but 4 does go into all of those numbers, okay? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to factor out the number 4. Okay, if I factor out the 4, we end up with an x squared. 4 goes into 28 7 times. 4 goes into 40 10 times. Now guys, I'm going to put this 4 over here. It's going to be part of my answer. Excuse me, but I don't need it just right now. Right now, what I want to look at is I want to look at what we have on the inside. The x squared plus 7x plus 10. Okay, so let's do our first part. 1 times 10 gives me 10. So the numbers that multiply to 10 are 1 and 10 and 2 and 5. And we want them to add up to 7. So we're going to use 2 and 5. So guys, right next to that number 4, I'm going to put an x plus 2 and an x plus 5. Okay. All right. let's try the next one. Again, we'll go about it the same exact way. Look at the first pieces that I have here. Oh, look, we have the number 6 common to all of them. So let's factor out the number 6. I'm left with an x squared. 6 goes into 24 4 times. 6 goes into 18 3 times. Okay, guys, I'm going to put that 6 over here because I'm going to need it. It's going to be part of my answer. Okay, and now I'm going to look at what we have on the inside, which is x squared plus 4x plus 3. So remember, I'm going to use my first number and my last number. So 1 times 3 is 3. Well, the only numbers that multiply to 3 are 1 and 3. And if you add them, we get 4. So my answer will be 6, and then x plus 1 and x plus 3. Right? All right. Let's try the same thing here for the next one. I'm going to go ahead and underline all 3 parts. I notice we can factor out the number 2. That leaves me with an x squared, a minus 10x. And let's see, 32 divided by 2 is a 16. Okay. Guys, so my first step, write down my number 2 over here. And then let me look at what we have on the inside. Okay. So remember, the number in front of that x squared is a 1. So 1 times 16 is in fact 16. And the numbers that I know to multiply to 16 are 1 and 16 and 2 and 8. I know 4 and 4 would work, but I'm going to stop right here because I'm trying to get a negative 10. That's going to give me a positive 10. If I make both of those numbers negative, they still multiply to a positive 16. But if I add them up, there's my negative 10. So now I can just go x minus 2 and x minus 8. Okay. Alrighty. For the next one we have here, let's factor out the number 3. And we're left with x squared minus 3 goes into 18 6 times. Plus 3 goes into 48. I want to say, let me grab my calculator. I want to say it's 18 times, but let me just double check. So let's go 48 divided by 3. 16 times, excuse me. Okay, so 16 times. Okay. So again, first step, let's bring down the 3. Okay, so now we have x squared minus 16, or excuse me, minus 6x plus 16, right? Okay, so for 16, let's see. We already had 16 up here. Okay, so we said 1 and 16, 2 and 8, 4 and 4. And if I notice here, guys, I can't make one of these positive, one of these negative, because that's a positive 16. So I want to say at this point, and 4 and 4 won't work. So at this point, this is going to be my final answer right here. I can't do anything other than factor out that number 3. Okay, that's where we stop. All right, but we do have one more here. And I bet you the first thing we can do is divide them all by 4. Okay, oops. And now I'm left with an x squared, a minus 2x, and I want to say that 60 divided by 4, here's my calculator, 60 divided by 4 should be 15. Yes, it is. Okay, so let's take a look. This is the number 15. Okay, so I'm going to put my 4 over here. Okay. Now I'm looking at what we have on the inside. So we're going to go 1 times negative 15 is a negative 15. Okay. Apparently I didn't need this part anymore, so let's get rid of that. Okay. And let's take a look. Well, we got 1 and 15, and we have 3 and 5. Notice the number here is negative. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at my bigger numbers. Well, the bigger numbers are these numbers here. Those numbers will be negative. Which ones give me a negative 2? These. So that'll leave me with an x plus 3 and an x minus 5. And that is section 5.3.